She
told you
slapped
to
me
stay away
twice in
from
that
him.
hospital corridor.
Vanessa,
I was 7 months pregnant.
stop, don't do this.
My husband stood 3 feet away and watched. He
Don't
did
worry,
not say a
sweetie.
word. He did not move.
Everything is
He
gonna
just
be all
stared at his
right.
shoes while his mistress
We'll
assaulted
figure
the
this
mother of his
out.
child. What none of them knew, not my cheating husband, not his cruel family, not the woman with her hand still raised to strike me again, was that my father owned that hospital. Every camera was recording. Every witness
Which one of
would
you is
remember.
responsible for this
They
negligence?
thought I was nobody. A poor, desperate wife
How
they
can
could
you
throw
be
away
so
like
cruel?
garbage. They were about to discover exactly
We are simply
who I
acknowledging
was.
the facts, dear.
My name is Charlotte Morgan. My father is worth $3 billion. And this is the story of how one satisfying slap destroyed an entire family. Just not mine. Stay with me until the end. Because the twist, you will never see it coming. The sound of her palm connecting with my face echoed through that hospital corridor like a gunshot. Time seemed to freeze. I was 7 months pregnant, my belly round and heavy with the child I had dreamed about for years. My husband stood exactly 3 feet away from me. I know the distance because I counted the floor tiles between us later, lying in my hospital bed, trying to understand how my life had fallen apart so completely. He did nothing. Derek Harrison, the man who had promised to love and protect me until death do us part, watched another woman assault his pregnant wife and did absolutely nothing. But here is the thing none of them knew. Not my cheating husband with his cowardly silence. Not his cruel family with their smug, satisfied smiles. Not the woman who had just struck me hard enough to make my ears ring. None of them had any idea who I really was. My father owned that hospital, and the security cameras positioned every 15 feet along that corridor were recording every single second of what had just happened. My name is Charlotte Morgan. Most people know my father as Lawrence Morgan, the billionaire who built Sterling Industries from nothing into one of the largest conglomerates in the American Midwest. Real estate, banking, media, healthcare. If you live in Chicago or anywhere within 300 miles of it, chances are my father owns something that affects your daily life. But I am getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you about the revenge, before I tell you about the destruction that rained down on the people who hurt me, I need to take you back to the beginning. Back to when I was just a woman in love, desperate to be loved in return for who I was rather than what my family name could provide. This is the story of how one slap destroyed an entire family. Just not mine. 3 years and 4 months before that moment in the hospital corridor, I met Derek Harrison at a home renovation expo in downtown Chicago. It was a Saturday in early March, the kind of gray, drizzly day that makes you want to stay inside with a cup of coffee and a good book. But I had work to do. As a freelance interior designer, these expos were my hunting grounds. New clients, new ideas, new connections that could turn into projects worth thousands of dollars. I was examining a display of sustainable bamboo flooring when I heard his voice for the first time. He was presenting his architecture firm's latest residential designs on a small stage near the back of the convention center. Something about the way he spoke made me stop what I was doing and listen. Derek Harrison was tall, just over 6 feet, with dark hair that curled slightly at his temples and eyes the color of strong black coffee. He wore a navy blue suit that fit him perfectly, not too expensive, not too cheap, just right. When he talked about buildings, about the way natural light could transform a space, about creating homes that felt like sanctuaries from the chaos of modern life, his whole face lit up with genuine passion. I found myself moving closer to the stage, drawn by something I could not quite name. By the time his presentation ended, I was standing in the front row, applauding along with everyone else. Afterward, I approached him with a business card and a question about the sustainable materials he had mentioned. 2 hours later, we were still talking, huddled in a corner of the Expo Center's crowded cafe, our coffees growing cold because neither of us wanted to break the conversation to get refills. He asked for my number. I gave it to him. 3 days later, he took me to dinner at a small Italian restaurant in Lincoln Park. 2 weeks after that, he kissed me goodnight on my doorstep and told me he had not felt this way about anyone in years. 6 months after that first conversation about bamboo flooring, I became Charlotte Harrison. I know what you are thinking. 6 months is fast. 6 months is reckless. 6 months is not nearly enough time to truly know another person, to understand their flaws and weaknesses, to see how they behave when life gets hard. You are absolutely right. But you have to understand something about my life before Derek. I grew up in a world where everyone wanted something from me. When your father is Lawrence Morgan, people do not see you. They see opportunity. They see access. They see a shortcut to wealth and power and all the things money can buy. My first serious boyfriend, a man named Tyler, whom I dated for 2 years in my early 20s, dumped me 3 weeks after he found out about my family's wealth. He said it made him feel emasculated. He said he could never be with someone who would always have more than him. He said a lot of things that boiled down to one simple truth. His ego was more important than his love for me. After Tyler, I dated cautiously. I kept my family background hidden, waiting to reveal it until I was sure the relationship was real. But somehow the truth always came out eventually. And when it did, everything changed. Men who had seemed genuine suddenly became calculating. Women who had seemed like friends suddenly wanted favors. Everyone had an angle. So when I met Derek, when I felt that instant connection, when he looked at me like I was the only person in the room, I made a decision. I would not tell him about my family. Not yet. I would let him fall in love with Charlotte, the interior designer, not Charlotte Morgan, the billionaire's daughter. It worked, maybe too well. Derek proposed on a beach in Michigan 6 months after our first date. The ring was modest, a small diamond on a simple gold band. He apologized for not being able to afford something bigger. I do not care about the size of the ring, I told him, and I meant it. I care about you. Looking back, I should have told him the truth right then. I should have said, Derek, there is something you need to know about me. I should have trusted that his love was real enough to survive the revelation. But I was scared that he would change, the way Tyler had changed. Scared that the way he looked at me would shift from love to calculation. Scared that I would lose the only person who had ever made me feel truly seen. So I stayed silent, and that silence would cost me everything. Our wedding was small, 30 guests in a garden venue outside the city. I wore a simple white dress that I had found on sale at a department store. My father attended dressed down in what he considered casual attire, which still probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. At my request, he did not give a speech. He did not draw attention to himself. He simply hugged me, whispered that he was proud of me, and sat quietly through the ceremony. I love you, Papa, I whispered back. Thank you for understanding. He did not understand. I could see it in his eyes, the confusion about why his daughter was hiding her identity, why she was marrying a man who did not know the full truth. But he respected my wishes because that is who my father is. Tough as steel in the boardroom, but soft as butter when it comes to me. Derek's family was there too, of course. I noticed them immediately, clustered together like a unit, eyeing me with barely concealed suspicion. His mother, Margaret Harrison, was a woman in her early 60s with silver hair styled in a perfect bob and eyes that assessed everything like she was calculating its resale value. She wore a designer dress that I recognized from a magazine, accessorized with pearls that were definitely real. Everything about her screamed old money, except there was something slightly off about it, a desperation in the way she displayed her wealth that suggested it was more performance than reality. His father, William Harrison, was a quiet man who seemed to exist entirely in his wife's shadow. He shook my hand limply at the reception and said congratulations without meeting my eyes. And then there was Brittany, Derek's younger sister. 25 at the time, with high-spided hair and a permanent pout, she introduced herself as a social media influencer. She had 12,000 followers on Instagram, most of which I would later learn she had purchased. She looked at my simple wedding dress with barely concealed contempt. That is certainly a choice, she said, gesturing at my gown. Thank you, I replied, choosing to take it as a compliment, even though we both knew it was not. I noticed the way Margaret looked at the venue, beautiful but not extravagant. I noticed the way she looked at the catering, good but not gourmet. I noticed the way she looked at me, like I was something unfortunate that her son had tracked in on his shoe. But I told myself it did not matter. Families are complicated. In-laws are notoriously difficult. she would warm up to me eventually. We had a lifetime to build a relationship. I was so naive, so desperate to believe in the fairy tale I had constructed, so blind to the warning signs that were flashing red all around me. The first year of our marriage was good, not perfect, not the constant bliss that romance novels promise, but good, real. Derek worked long hours at his architecture firm, building his career one project at a time. I supported him in every way I could, cooking dinners he was often too tired to eat, listening to his frustrations about difficult clients, believing in his dreams even when he doubted himself. We lived in a townhouse in a nice neighborhood. It was not mine, that is important. The townhouse was purchased with help from Derek's family, and the deed was in their names, not ours. Derek said it was just temporary, just until we could afford something of our own. I did not push the issue because I did not want to seem materialistic. Another mistake, another silence that would come back to haunt me. Margaret's comments started small, little jabs disguised as concern or advice. "You know, Charlotte," she said at one family dinner, watching me serve the roast I had spent 3 hours preparing, "a good wife really should know how to make something more sophisticated than basic home cooking." Derek is used to finer things. I smiled and said nothing. I told myself she was just being protective of her son. At Brittany's birthday party, Margaret cornered me by the dessert table. "That dress is interesting," she said, looking me up and down. "Very bohemian. Is that what designers are wearing these days?" "I thought you worked in interior design, not fashion, but perhaps you know better." I smiled and said nothing. I told myself she would warm up to me eventually. On Christmas morning, I gave Derek a watch I had saved for months to afford. It was not expensive by his family's standards, but it meant something to me. Margaret examined it with pursed lips. "Handmade gifts have their charm, I suppose," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "when one cannot afford real presents." I smiled and said nothing. I told myself that keeping the peace was more important than defending myself. But here's the thing about keeping the peace. When you stay silent, people assume you have nothing to say. When you do not defend yourself, people assume you do not deserve defense. And when you let someone treat you like a doormat, they start wiping their feet. Derek never defended me, not once, not during his mother's cutting remarks, not during his sister's snide comments, not during the countless small humiliations I endured with a smile. "That is just how she is," he would say whenever I tried to talk about it. "She does not mean anything by it. Do not let it bother you." But she did mean something by it. And it did bother me. I just refused to admit it because admitting it would mean admitting that my fairy tale was a lie. Then 7 months ago, everything changed forever. I found out I was pregnant. I still remember the exact moment I found out I was carrying a child. It was a Tuesday morning in early autumn, the kind of crisp, golden day that makes you believe anything is possible. I had been feeling strange for weeks, tired in a way that sleep could not fix, nauseous at odd times, emotional over commercials for car insurance and breakfast cereal. My period was 2 weeks late, which had never happened before in my entire adult life. So I drove to a pharmacy 3 neighborhoods away, irrationally afraid of running into someone I knew, and bought 3 different pregnancy tests. Just to be sure, all 3 were positive. I sat on the bathroom floor for an hour, staring at those little pink lines, feeling my heart expand with a joy so pure and overwhelming that it brought tears streaming down my face. A baby. Derek's baby. Our baby. A family of our own. I imagined telling him. I imagined his face lighting up with that smile I had fallen in love with. I imagined us picking out cribs together, arguing playfully over baby names, decorating a nursery in soft yellows and greens. I imagined him holding our child for the first time, tears in his eyes, promising to be the best father in the world. I wanted the moment to be special, perfect, something we would tell our child about years later. So I waited until Derek came home from work. I made his favorite dinner, chicken parmesan with homemade pasta. I even bought a bottle of sparkling cider so I could toast with him while staying alcohol-free. For my surprise, I had purchased a tiny pair of baby shoes. Yellow, gender neutral, impossibly small. I wrapped them in a gift box with a bow and placed them on his empty plate. Derek came home at 7:30, later than usual, but not late enough to be suspicious. He looked tired, distracted, but he smiled when he saw the candles on the table. "What is all this?" he asked, shrugging off his coat. "I wanted to do something special," I said. "Open your present." He sat down and picked up the box. I watched his face carefully, waiting for the moment of realization, waiting for the joy I had imagined all day. He opened the box, he looked at the tiny shoes, he looked at me, and then he said, "Already?" That single word hit me like a physical blow. Already. Not, "Oh my God." Not, "I am so happy." Not, "I love you." Already. Like I had just told him we were out of milk. Like this pregnancy was an inconvenience rather than a miracle. We talked about waiting, he continued, his brow furrowing. We said we would get more established first. I felt the joy draining out of me, replaced by something cold and uncertain. "I know we talked about it," I said carefully, "but sometimes life has other plans. This is a good thing, Derek. This is our baby." He nodded slowly. "Right. No, you are right. It is just a lot to process." He hugged me then, said the right words, made the right sounds, but something had shifted. I could feel it. A distance that had not been there before. A wall going up between us. I told myself he was just surprised, that he needed time to adjust, that everything would be fine once the initial shock wore off. I was wrong. Over the following weeks, Derek changed. He started working later, coming home at 9 or 10 instead of 7. His phone was always face down on the table, and he would jump slightly whenever it buzzed, checking the screen with a quick, furtive glance before relaxing. When I tried to talk about the baby, about doctor's appointments and nursery preparations, he would find excuses to leave the room. He needed to make a work call. He had to check something on his laptop. He was tired and needed to lie down. I made excuses for him because making excuses was easier than facing the truth. He was nervous about becoming a father. Work was stressful. It was a big adjustment for both of us. But deep down, in a place I refused to examine too closely, I knew something was wrong. 3 months into my pregnancy, I started noticing a name that appeared on his phone with increasing frequency. Vanessa. It would flash across his screen when messages arrived. He would smile slightly when he read them, a private smile that made my stomach clench with unease. "Who is Vanessa?" I asked one evening, trying to keep my voice casual. Derek did not look up from his phone. "Just someone from work. Marketing department. You seem to message with her a lot." Now he looked up, his expression carefully neutral. "We are working on a project together. It requires a lot of coordination." "What kind of project?" "Charlie." His voice had an edge to it. "It is work stuff. You would not understand the details." "I probably would not," I agreed, swallowing the hurt. "I am just an interior designer, after all." He missed the sarcasm entirely. "Exactly. Do not worry about it." I should have pushed harder. I should have demanded to see the messages, to know exactly what kind of project required late-night texts and secret smiles. But I was pregnant and tired and desperately trying to believe that my marriage was not falling apart. My best friend Patty had no such delusions. Patricia Wells was a divorce attorney, one of the best in the city. We had been friends since college, bonded over terrible dining hall food, and shared complaints about our overbearing parents. She had watched me fall in love with Derek with the skeptical eye of someone who had seen too many marriages collapse. "Something is wrong," I told her over coffee one afternoon, my hand resting on my growing belly. "He is distant, secretive. I found a receipt for a dinner I was not invited to." Patty stirred her latte, her expression carefully neutral. "Have you asked him about it?" "He says it is work." "And you believe him?" I hesitated. "I want to believe him. That is not the same thing." She put down her spoon and looked at me with the direct, unflinching gaze that made her so effective in court. "Charlotte, I am going to give you some advice. You do not have to take it, but I want you to hear it." "Okay, document everything." I blinked. "What?" "Screenshots of anything suspicious, dates and times when he comes home late, credit card statements, phone records if you can access them. I am not saying he is cheating," she added quickly, seeing my expression. But your future self will thank your present self for having receipts. That feels like I am expecting him to fail. No, honey. Patty reached across the table and squeezed my hand. That is called being prepared. There is a difference between expecting rain and owning an umbrella. I did not start documenting things that day. I was not ready to admit that my marriage might need evidence, but I did start paying closer attention. And the more I paid attention, the more I saw. Derek's phone buzzed with messages at all hours. He started going to the gym more often, coming home freshly showered and smelling like cologne he had never worn before. He got a haircut, updated his wardrobe, started caring about his appearance in ways he had let slide during our marriage. All of these things on their own could have been innocent. A husband trying to get in shape before becoming a father. A man taking pride in his appearance. Nothing suspicious. But taken together, they painted a picture I did not want to see. The name Vanessa appeared more and more frequently. In his calendar, blocked off for meetings that lasted until 8 or 9 in the evening. In his texts, which he now deleted regularly, though I occasionally caught glimpses over his shoulder. In his voice, which softened when he mentioned her, a tenderness I had not heard directed at me in months. At 5 months pregnant, I made a decision. I would look at his phone, just once, just to put my mind at ease. I waited until he was in the shower, the bathroom door closed, the water running. His phone was on the nightstand, face down as always. My hands shook as I picked it up and entered his passcode, his birthday, which he had never bothered to change. The messages were right there, hundreds of them. I miss you already. Last night was incredible. I cannot wait until we can be together for real. My mother says you would be perfect for me. The world tilted. I sat down heavily on the bed, the phone clutched in my trembling hands, feeling my heart shatter into a million pieces. The shower turned off. I heard Derek moving around in the bathroom. In a moment of clarity that cut through the pain, I did what Patty had told me to do. I took screenshots, dozens of them. I sent them to my own phone, then deleted the sent messages. I put his phone back exactly where I had found it. When Derek emerged from the bathroom, towel around his waist, I was sitting on the bed with my hands folded over my belly. "Everything okay?" he asked, not really looking at me. "Fine," I said, "just tired." He nodded and started getting dressed for bed, already reaching for his phone to check his messages. I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, feeling the baby kick against my palm, wondering how I had ended up here. The next day I called Patty. "You were right," I said. "I need an umbrella." 2 weeks after I discovered the messages, I came home to find my life waiting to explode. It was a Thursday afternoon. I had just come from a doctor's appointment, one that Derek had promised to attend, and then canceled at the last minute because of an emergency meeting at work. An emergency that probably had blonde hair and worked in marketing. The baby was healthy, growing right on schedule, a strong heartbeat that filled the ultrasound room with its steady rhythm. The doctor gave me pictures to take home, fuzzy black and white images of the child I was carrying. I tucked them into my purse, trying not to think about how Derek would barely glance at them before setting them aside. I was 7 months pregnant now. My back ached constantly. My ankles had disappeared somewhere around month 5, swollen beyond recognition. I was exhausted in a bone-deep way that made even simple tasks feel monumental. I just wanted to go home, put my feet up, and pretend my marriage was not falling apart. But when I pulled into the driveway, I saw Derek's car, and another car I recognized as Margaret's, and another one that belonged to Brittany. My stomach clenched with immediate, instinctive dread. The Harrisons did not make casual visits. Every interaction was calculated, purposeful. If they were all here together in the middle of a workday, something was happening. I walked through the front door with my purse over my shoulder and my ultrasound pictures clutched in my hand like a talisman. They were all sitting in the living room. Derek on the couch, his hands clasped between his knees, his eyes fixed on the floor. Margaret in the armchair by the window, her posture rigid with barely concealed excitement. William on the love seat, looking uncomfortable but committed. Brittany perched on the arm of the sofa, phone in hand, already recording. The air in that room was charged with anticipation, the wrong kind of anticipation. Like the moment before a storm breaks. What is going on? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Why is everyone here? Margaret rose from her chair with the graceful efficiency of a predator moving in for the kill. We need to discuss the future of this family, she said. What about the future? Margaret smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment, savoring it, planning exactly what she would say. Vanessa is pregnant. The words hung in the air like smoke from a bomb. I felt my knees weaken. I put a hand on the back of the nearest chair to steady myself. What did you say? You heard me. Margaret's eyes were bright with malicious satisfaction. Vanessa Blake is pregnant with Derek's child, the real heir to this family. I looked at Derek, my husband, the father of the child growing inside me. I waited for him to deny it, to tell me his mother was lying, to stand up and say this was all a terrible misunderstanding. He did not look up from the floor. Derek, my voice came out as a whisper, tell me this is not true. Margaret continued as if I had not spoken. Vanessa comes from a good family, she said, ticking off points on her manicured fingers. Her father owns a construction company. Her mother sits on the board of the women's auxiliary at the country club. She has a degree from Northwestern and impeccable social connections. She is everything you are not. I could not breathe. The room was spinning. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall. We never should have allowed this marriage in the first place, Margaret continued. I told Derek from the beginning that you were beneath him, that you would hold him back. I was right. William spoke for the first time. His voice was flat, rehearsed. You trapped our son with this pregnancy, but now he has a real heir coming, a legitimate one. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to ask what made my baby any less legitimate than Vanessa's. I wanted to demand to know when the Harrison family had appointed themselves the arbiters of which children deserve to exist. But my throat had closed up. I could not make words come out. Brittany grinned at me over the top of her phone. Pack your bags, Charlotte. This house does not need two pregnant women, and you are definitely not the one we are choosing. I turned to Derek. I made myself walk toward him, my pregnant belly leading the way, my heart shattering with every step. Please, I whispered, tell me we can fix this. Tell me we can work through this. I love you. He finally raised his head, and what I saw in his eyes destroyed me more thoroughly than anything his family had said. Guilt, shame, regret, but not love. Not even a shadow of the feeling that had once made me believe in fairy tales. I am sorry, he whispered. That was it. 2 words. The same thing you might say if you accidentally bumped into someone in a grocery store. I am sorry, like 3 years of marriage could be dismissed so easily. Like the child I was carrying was an inconvenience rather than a human being. Margaret grabbed my arm. Her fingers dug into my flesh hard enough to leave bruises. Get out, she hissed. Now, I tried to pull away. But I am pregnant. Where am I supposed to go? That is not our problem anymore. They pushed me toward the door, all of them except Derek, who sat frozen on the couch like a mannequin. Brittany ran upstairs and came back with a suitcase. My suitcase. Already packed. They had planned this. They had coordinated this ambush while I was at my doctor's appointment, looking at pictures of my baby, hoping my husband might someday care enough to come with me. The suitcase landed on the front lawn. I stumbled after it, my pregnant belly throwing off my balance, my heels catching on the grass. Behind me, I heard the front door slam, the lock click, and then the sky opened up and rain began to fall. I stood there in my maternity dress, 7 months pregnant, watching the drops soak through my clothes. I saw curtains twitch in the neighbors' windows, curious eyes witnessing my humiliation, judging me, pitying me. My phone was in my purse. My purse was still in my house, but my car keys were in my pocket. My wallet was in my coat. I had one place left to go. The drive to my father's estate took over an hour in the rain. My hands shook on the steering wheel. My vision blurred with tears I could no longer hold back. I pulled over twice because I could not see through my own crying. But I made it. Somehow I made it. The security guard at the gate recognized me immediately. Miss Charlotte? His voice was sharp with concern. Are you all right? I could not answer him. I could only shake my head and drive through when he opened the gates. My father's mansion rose up through the rain like a beacon. I had not been here in 8 months. Derek always felt uncomfortable around my father's wealth, so I had stayed away to make him happy. Another sacrifice for a man who did not deserve it. By the time I reached the front door, my father was already there. Lawrence Morgan stood in the doorway, his usual composure cracked by something I had not seen since my mother died. Fear. Charlotte, he pulled me inside, wrapping me in his arms without caring that I was getting his expensive suit wet. What happened? Where is Derek? I collapsed against his chest and told him everything. The affair, the pregnancy, the ambush, the way they had thrown me out like garbage while my husband watched and said nothing. And I watched my father's face transform from concern to something I had never seen directed at anyone but me. Pure, controlled, devastating rage. I will destroy them, he said quietly. Every single one of them. My father's study smelled like old books and expensive whiskey. It always had, ever since I was a little girl sneaking in to read while he worked late into the night. The leather chairs were the same ones I remembered climbing into as a child, pretending I was a powerful businesswoman making important decisions. Now I sat in one of those chairs for real, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, watching my father pace back and forth like a caged tiger. Give me their names, he said. All of them. Everyone who was in that room. Papa, please. I reached out and grabbed his hand, stopping his pacing. Do not do anything yet. He looked at me like I had suggested we invite them over for tea. They threw you out. You are 7 months pregnant with their own grandchild. They stood there and watched while you were humiliated, I know. But Derek did not say anything. He just let it happen. Maybe Vanessa manipulated him. Maybe his mother pressured him into this. Maybe if I give him time. Time? My father's voice cracked with disbelief. You want to give him time? 1 week, I said. If he does not come to his senses in 1 week, I will not stop you. I will help you. But I need to know that I tried everything. I need to be able to tell my daughter someday that I gave her father every possible chance. My father stared at me for a long moment. I could see the war raging behind his eyes. The part of him that wanted to rain destruction down on everyone who had hurt me versus the part that understood strategy, patience, and timing. 1 week, he finally said. 7 days. If he has not come crawling back with proof that he has left Vanessa and his toxic family behind, I will end them all. I nodded. 1 week. That night, my father called his personal physician. The stress of the day had triggered contractions that were too early and too strong. Within hours, I was admitted to Sterling Memorial Hospital for monitoring. I did not know, as they wheeled me through the private entrance, that my father owned this hospital. I had deliberately avoided learning the details of his business empire, so committed to being my own person that I had ignored the resources that were always available to me. This hospital is named after your mother, my father said quietly, as we rode the elevator to the top floor. I looked at him in surprise. It is? He nodded. I built it the year after she died. I wanted something that would help people the way she always wanted to help people. I had never known that. There was so much about my father I had never taken the time to learn, so busy trying to prove I did not need him. The irony burned. My private suite at Sterling Memorial was nicer than most luxury hotel rooms. Fresh flowers on every surface, real art on the walls, a view of the Chicago skyline that would have cost thousands a night anywhere else. The doctors and nurses treated me with a deference that made it clear they knew exactly who my father was. I spent my first night there staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of my marriage, looking for the signs I had missed. They were all there if I was honest with myself. The late nights, the secret smiles at his phone, the way he flinched when I touched him unexpectedly. The distance that had grown between us so gradually, I had not noticed until it was a canyon. The signs had been there all along. I just had not wanted to see them. The next morning, I started texting Derek. Please talk to me. I am in the hospital. Our baby needs you. The red receipts showed he saw every message within minutes of me sending them. He did not respond. I sent more. I still love you. We can work through this together. Please, Derek, please. Nothing, not a single word in reply. By day 3, I had accepted the truth I had been avoiding. Derek was not coming. Whatever Vanessa and his family had offered him, whatever hold they had on him, it was stronger than any loyalty he felt toward me. Stronger than our marriage vows. Stronger than his own child. My father visited every day, bringing magazines and flowers and increasingly detailed updates on his research into the Harrison family's finances. Did you know, he mentioned casually while arranging chrysanthemums in a vase, that Derek's architecture firm is 60% funded by loans from banks associated with Sterling Holdings? Papa? Or that his mother's jewelry business operates entirely in mall spaces owned by Sterling Properties? He set down the flowers and picked up an apple, examining it with apparent fascination. Her lease renewals are all coming up in the next 60 days. You promised you would wait. I am waiting. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. I am just gathering information while I wait. Knowledge is power, sweetheart. You taught me that. I had not taught him that. He had taught it to me decades ago when I was still young enough to believe my father was invincible. What else have you found? I asked, despite myself. He pulled a folder from his briefcase. I had my team do some research. The Harrison family is not what they appear to be. I sat up straighter, ignoring the pull of the IV line in my arm. What do you mean? They present themselves as old money, but they are not. Not really. He opened the folder and began spreading documents across my hospital bed. William Harrison inherited a modest real estate portfolio from his father, but he has managed it poorly. They have been slowly bleeding money for 15 years. Margaret's jewelry business is barely breaking even. And Brittany's influencer career has actually cost them more than it has earned. They are broke. They are struggling. My father's voice was grim, and they were counting on Derek marrying someone who could solve their financial problems. Someone like me, I said quietly. Someone like you. Or failing that, someone like Vanessa Blake. What do you mean? My father pulled out another document. Vanessa's father is a contractor named Robert Blake. Mid-sized company, mostly residential construction. He has been trying to break into commercial development for years, but has not been able to secure the right contracts or the right connections. I started to see the shape of it. A picture forming from fragments. The Harrisons thought I was poor, I said slowly. They thought Derek married beneath himself. That is why Margaret was always so cruel to me. Exactly. They were disappointed in his choice. But when they learned about Vanessa, whose father could potentially help with their real estate problems, suddenly she became very attractive. But she is pregnant with Derek's baby. That is not just a business arrangement. My father's expression hardened. Are you sure about that? What do you mean? I mean, are you absolutely certain that baby is Derek's? I stared at him. I had never considered the possibility. Vanessa's pregnancy had seemed like the ultimate betrayal, proof that Derek's affair was serious rather than a momentary lapse. But what if it was something else entirely? I do not know, I admitted. I assumed. My father nodded. I have someone looking into it, discreetly. There may be more to Vanessa Blake than meets the eye. On day 4, everything changed. I was feeling better. The contractions had stopped, the baby was stable, and my doctor had recommended light walking to help with circulation. My father had gone downstairs to the pharmacy to pick up some prenatal vitamins the doctor had added to my regimen. I decided to take a short walk, just down the corridor and back, maybe to the garden area I had glimpsed from my window. Some fresh air, some movement, something to break the monotony of lying in bed and waiting for my husband to remember I existed. I was not thinking about anything in particular. Baby names, maybe. Whether I would ever stop loving a man who clearly did not deserve it. What kind of mother I would be, raising a child alone. Then I turned a corner and my heart stopped beating. Derek was there, standing at a nurse's station about 30 feet away, wearing the blue sweater I had given him for his birthday. The one I had searched 3 weeks to find because he mentioned wanting exactly that shade. For one delirious moment, I thought he had come for me, that he had finally realized his mistake, that he was here to apologize and beg my forgiveness and tell me he chose me, he would always choose me. He was sorry for ever making me doubt. Derek, I called out. He turned, and the look on his face was not relief or love or joy, it was horror. Before I could process Derek's expression, they appeared. like a nightmare materializing from the shadows. Margaret emerged from a nearby room, her designer handbag gleaming under the fluorescent lights. William shuffled behind her, his expression uncomfortable but resigned to whatever was about to happen. Brittany bounced out next, already reaching for her phone with the instinct of a predator, sensing weakness. And then I saw her. Vanessa Blake was being wheeled out in a wheelchair, though I noticed immediately that she seemed perfectly capable of walking. She wore a red designer dress that showcased her pregnant belly like a trophy. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. The wheelchair was theater. I understood that instinctively. The whole thing was a performance designed to make her look fragile and sympathetic, while I stood there in a hospital gown with unwashed hair and dark circles under my eyes. "Are you stalking us now?" Margaret's voice cut through the corridor like a blade. Her eyes were bright with malicious satisfaction. "This is pathetic, Charlotte, even for you." "I am a patient here," I managed to say. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "I was admitted 3 days ago." Brittany laughed, her phone already recording. "Oh my God, this is too perfect." The scorned wife lurking around the hospital, hoping to catch a glimpse of her replacement. "I am not lurking, I am." Vanessa stood up from the wheelchair, proving my suspicions correct. She moved toward me with the confidence of a woman who had already won. "So you are the first wife," she said. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were cold as ice. "Derek told me all about you, how you trapped him into marriage, how you were always holding him back from his true potential, how relieved he was when he finally found someone who understood him." Every word was a knife. I felt them sink in one after another, finding all the soft places I had tried to protect. I looked at Derek. He was standing frozen, his face pale, his hands shoved in his pockets. He would not meet my eyes. "Derek," my voice cracked, "I am carrying your baby. Does not that mean anything to you?" He opened his mouth to speak, but Margaret cut him off. "That baby means nothing." Her voice was sharp and final. "Vanessa's baby is the real heir to this family, the child that will carry on the Harrison legacy." I stepped closer to my husband. My legs felt like they might give out at any moment, but I forced them to move. "Please," I whispered, "we can work through this. I love you. I have always loved you." The slap came out of nowhere. Vanessa's hand connected with my face so hard that the sound echoed through the entire corridor. My head snapped to the side. Pain exploded across my cheek, hot and sharp. I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my face, my other hand instinctively cradling my belly. For a moment, the world went silent. I could see nurses frozen mid-step, their mouths open in shock. Visitors staring with wide eyes, a security guard reaching for his radio. "Stay away from my husband," Vanessa screamed. Her face was twisted with rage, all pretense of sweetness gone. "He is mine now. You are nothing." I looked at Derek, waiting for him to say something, to do something, to show even the smallest sign that he still remembered he had once promised to protect me. He stared at his shoes. Margaret was nodding, her expression approving. Good. She needed that reality check. Brittany was actually laughing. "Oh my God," she said to her phone. "Did you see that? This is amazing content." Something inside me cracked. Not broke. There is a difference. Breaking means you fall apart. Cracking means light can get through. I straightened up. I wiped the blood from my lip where my teeth had cut the inside of my mouth. And I looked Vanessa Blake directly in the eyes. "You just assaulted a pregnant woman," I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. In a hospital corridor, on camera, in front of witnesses. Vanessa's smug expression flickered. She had not thought that far ahead. She had expected me to cower, to cry, to run away in shame. "You are nothing," she spat. "You are nobody. Derek told me all about you. Poor little Charlotte with your pathetic little design business and your cheap clothes and your desperate need to be loved." I thought about all the ways I could respond, all the secrets I could reveal, the truth about who my father was, the power I had access to that she could not even imagine. But before I could say anything, she raised her hand again. This time I was ready. I caught her wrist before she could make contact. My grip was strong from years of moving furniture and hanging heavy mirrors. I held her arm in midair, watching her eyes widen with surprise. "Once was assault," I said quietly, so only she could hear. Twice would be a mistake you cannot afford. Let go of me. She tried to pull away, but I held firm. Derek, do something. Derek did not move. I released her wrist and stepped back directly into the solid chest of a security guard who had materialized behind me. Ma'am, he said to Vanessa, his voice professionally neutral but his eyes hard, I need you to step away from this patient. She is the one who, step away now. Vanessa retreated, her face flushed with fury and embarrassment. Margaret moved to comfort her. William stood uselessly to the side. Brittany was still filming, her expression gleeful. And then I heard the voice that changed everything. What did you just do? I turned toward the elevators. My father was standing there, a small pharmacy bag in one hand. His face was completely expressionless, which somehow made him more terrifying than if he had been screaming. The atmosphere in the corridor shifted instantly. The security guards stood straighter. A hospital administrator appeared from nowhere, his face pale with recognition. Mr. Sterling, the administrator's voice was high with anxiety. Sir, we did not know your daughter was a patient here. If we had known. My father ignored him completely. He walked straight to me and knelt down, taking my hands in his. Baby, his voice was gentle, but I could see the rage burning behind his eyes. Are you all right? Papa, the word came out as a sob. She hit me, the baby. Doctors materialized from every direction. I was surrounded by medical personnel, placed in a wheelchair, rushed toward the emergency room. My father stayed beside me the whole time, holding my hand, his thumb rubbing circles on my palm, the way he used to do when I was a little girl having nightmares. As they wheeled me away, I heard his voice. Quiet, deadly calm. Security. Get their names, all of them. Every single person who stood here and watched. And pull the footage from every camera on this floor. The last thing I saw before the elevator doors closed was Derek's face. Pale, terrified, finally understanding that he had made a terrible mistake. But it was too late. Far, far too late. The examination took 3 hours. Monitors beeped. Doctors consulted in hushed voices. I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, one hand on my belly, feeling my daughter kick against my palm, like she was trying to reassure me she was still there, still fighting. The baby is showing signs of stress, the doctor finally has said. Her voice was gentle but serious. The trauma of the assault triggered some contractions. We have managed to stop them, but you need complete bed rest for the remaining weeks of your pregnancy. Any more stress could trigger early labor. She, I repeated, latching onto the one word that mattered. It is a girl? The doctor smiled softly. I am sorry, I should not have revealed that without asking. Did you want to know the gender? Yes. Tears were streaming down my face, but for the first time all day, they were not tears of pain. Yes, I wanted to know. You are having a daughter. She is strong. Her heartbeat is steady. My father was waiting outside the examination room. When I told him he was going to have a granddaughter, I saw something I had not witnessed since my mother's funeral. Tears in his eyes. A granddaughter, he said softly. Then his expression hardened into something cold and resolute. They will pay for this, Charlotte. I do not care what you said before. They will pay for what they did to you. To both of you. I was too exhausted to argue, too broken to protest. And honestly, watching Derek stand there while another woman slapped me, watching his family laugh and record my humiliation, something had shifted inside me. I no longer wanted to save my marriage. I wanted to watch it burn. Over the next 24 hours, my father made phone calls. I did not know all the details at the time. I was focused on rest, on my daughter, on surviving each hour without falling apart. But later, much later, I learned exactly what he had set in motion. Derek's architecture firm received notice that their primary business loans were being called in. Full payment due in 72 hours. The loans totaled over $2 million. The firm had maybe $50,000 in liquid assets. Margaret Harrison opened her email to find lease termination notices for all 3 of her jewelry store locations. The notices cited violations of obscure clauses buried deep in contracts that no one had ever bothered to read. She had 30 days to vacate. William Harrison watched his investment portfolio tank overnight. Properties he had owned for years suddenly lost values as construction projects appeared on adjacent lots. Rezoning applications were filed that would turn his residential holdings into worthless land. Brittany Harrison's sponsorships evaporated. Every brand, every partnership, every deal she had spent years cultivating, gone. The brand cited her association with a viral assault video as the reason for termination. And Robert Blake, Vanessa's father? His 3 ongoing construction projects were halted pending permit reviews. Reviews that, according to the bureaucratic letters he received, could take months or even years to resolve. My father did not just pull strings. He owned the strings. He owned the puppets. He owned the entire theater. But he was not finished. 3 days after the assault, the hospital's security footage leaked. I do not know how. I do not know who. My father never told me, and I never asked. But suddenly, everyone with an internet connection could watch Vanessa Blake slap a visibly pregnant woman while her lover stood frozen in cowardly silence. The video went viral within hours. Millions of views, thousands of comments. The hashtag Justice for Charlotte was trending on every platform. Patty visited me in the hospital on day 4, her laptop balanced on my bed, reading comments aloud. How can that man just stand there while his pregnant wife gets assaulted? That family literally laughed. They laughed while a pregnant woman was being hit. These people are monsters. The mistress slapped her twice, and the husband did nothing. I hope karma destroys all of them. Wait, who is the guy in the background in the suit? Did anyone else notice how all the staff reacted when he showed up? Someone said he owns the hospital. She looked up at me. They are connecting the dots, Charlotte. People are figuring out who your father is. Good, I said. I was surprised by their coldness in my own voice. Let them figure it out. Derek showed up at my father's estate on day 5. I watched from my bedroom window as he approached the security gate, his car looking shabby compared to the sleek vehicles passing on the private road. He spoke to the guards for several minutes, his body language increasingly desperate. His hands gestured wildly. His shoulders slumped when they refused to let him in. My father went out to speak with him. I could not hear the conversation, but I could see Derek's face. The panic, the desperation, the dawning realization that he had destroyed his own life. When my father came back inside, his expression was satisfied in a way I had never seen before. What did you tell him? I asked. The truth, my father said. He had months to choose you, every single day of your marriage. He had the opportunity to be the husband you deserved. He chose them instead. Now he has to live with the consequences. Part of me wanted to run outside, to tell Derek I forgave him, to believe that love could somehow salvage the wreckage. But I did not, because I had finally learned something that had taken me far too long to understand. Words are cheap, actions are expensive, and Derek had never been willing to pay the price for me. For 2 weeks, I thought the worst was over. The Harrison family was in ruins. Derek's firm had folded. Margaret's stores were closed. William's investments had evaporated. Brittany's career was a joke. And Vanessa Blake had become the most hated woman on the internet, her face plastered across articles about entitlement and karma. I was safe in my father's mansion, surrounded by doctors and nurses and security guards. My daughter was healthy, growing stronger every day. The contractions had stopped completely. The stress was fading. I started to believe I might actually survive this. Then Derek sent me a message. I know I do not deserve your forgiveness. But please, Charlotte, I need to explain. I need you to understand what happened. Can we meet? Just once? I will not ask for anything else. I should have ignored it. I should have shown it to my father and let him handle it. I should have remembered everything Derek had done and not done. But some stupid, stubborn part of me still wanted answers. Still wanted to understand how the man I loved had become someone I did not recognize. I agreed to meet him, against Patty's strenuous objections, against my father's explicit warnings, against every rational instinct screaming at me to stay away. We met at a small cafe downtown. I wore sunglasses to cover the bruise that was still fading on my cheek. Derek was already there when I arrived, looking thinner than I remembered, older, diminished in ways I could not quite define. Charlie, he said when he saw me. He stood up, then hesitated, clearly unsure whether he was allowed to hug me. God, Charlie, I am so sorry. I slid into the booth across from him. Do not call me that. He flinched. Okay. Charlotte, I am sorry. You keep saying that, I observed. Sorry seems to be the only word you know. He sat down heavily. You are right. You are absolutely right. I have been a coward. I have been weak. I have been everything a husband should not be. So explain. That is why I am here. For the next hour he talked about how Vanessa had pursued him relentlessly for months, about how his mother had encouraged the relationship, seeing Vanessa's family connections as a solution to their financial problems, about how trapped he had felt, caught between his family's expectations and his own conscience. She told me things, he said, his voice cracking, about you, about your work. She made me believe you were unhappy with me, that you were already thinking about leaving. She said we were perfect for each other, that we understood each other in ways you and I never could. And you believed her, I said flatly. I wanted to believe her. He looked down at his hands. It was easier than admitting I was failing you. Easier than facing the fact that I was not the man you deserved. What about the baby? What about when she told you she was pregnant? I was terrified. He laughed bitterly. Terrified and stupid and completely in over my head. My mother said Vanessa's baby was a sign. That fate was giving me a second chance at a better life. I wanted to believe that too. I looked at him across the table. This man I had loved so desperately. This man who had shattered my heart so completely. Do you still believe it? He met my eyes for the first time. No, I do not believe any of it. Vanessa manipulated me. My mother used me, and I was too weak to see it until it was too late. There was a pause, a moment where anything felt possible. I still love you, Derek continued. I know I have no right to say that. I know I have destroyed any chance of you believing me, but it is true. I never stopped loving you, Charlotte. I just lost myself somewhere along the way. I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but something softer than the anger I had been carrying. What do you want? I asked. A chance, he said immediately. I will do whatever it takes. I will cut off my family completely. I will end things with Vanessa. I will sign over everything I own to you. I will spend the rest of my life making up for what I did. Just please, Charlotte, give me one more chance. I sat with his words for a long moment. Part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me wanted to go back to the way things were before everything fell apart. Then I remembered Patty's voice in my head. What did he actually commit to? Did he give you a timeline? Did he offer specifics? Or did he just say words that felt good? I will think about it, I finally said. Derek's face lit up with hope. That is all I am asking, time to prove myself. I left the cafe feeling confused, off balance, unsure of what I wanted or what I should do. That night I called Patty. Let me guess. Yes, she said. He apologized. He explained. He promised to change. How did you know? Because that is what they always do. Her voice was gentle but firm. Charlotte, I have been a divorce attorney for 12 years. I have heard every version of that speech you can imagine. They are always sorry. They always have explanations. They always promise to do better. Maybe he means it this time. Maybe. But here's the question you need to ask yourself. Did he say he would fix it, or did he show you the plan? I was silent. Fix it is what men say when they want the problem to go away, Patty continued. Here is what I am going to do. Here is when I am going to do it. Here is how you will know it is real. That is commitment. Everything else is just noise. She was right. I knew she was right. But I still was not ready to give up entirely. For the next week, I waited. I watched. I gave Derek the opportunity to show me his plan. He texted every day. Sweet messages, apologetic messages, messages that made my heart ache with longing for what we used to have. But he did not come to see me again. He did not file for divorce from the situation with Vanessa. He did not publicly denounce his family. He did not do anything except send words across a screen and hope they would be enough. On day 10, I received a text from a number I did not recognize. You should know that your husband has been staying at my apartment every night this week, in case you were wondering where his loyalties actually lie. V attached was a photograph. Derek asleep in a bed that was not ours, the sheets tangled around him like evidence of intimacy. I stared at that picture for a long time. Then I deleted Derek's contact from my phone and blocked his number. Some lessons have to be learned more than once. Just when I thought I had reached rock bottom, the floor collapsed beneath me. It started with a podcast. Vanessa Blake, apparently deciding that offense was the best defense, had hired a PR crisis manager. Together, they had crafted a narrative that painted her as the victim and me as the villain. She appeared on a popular true crime and drama show, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. Charlotte Morgan is the daughter of Lawrence Morgan, she said, one of the richest men in the Midwest. She hid her family's wealth to trap Derek into marriage. She wanted a man she could control, someone who would be grateful for any scrap of attention she gave him. When Derek found real love with me, when he discovered what it felt like to be truly appreciated, her family used their billions to destroy innocent people. I am not the homewrecker here, she continued, her eyes glistening with tears that looked absolutely real. I am the victim of a powerful family who cannot accept that their princess did not get her fairy tale ending. The narrative shifted within hours. Headlines appeared across tabloid websites and social media. Billionaire's daughter uses family fortune as weapon. Is Charlotte Morgan a victim or a villain? The other side of the viral hospital video. People started questioning everything. Maybe the slap was provoked. Maybe Charlotte had said something horrible first. Maybe the Harrison family was right all along. Maybe I was the real monster in this story. I watched my reputation crumble in real time, unable to do anything to stop it. That was catastrophe number one. Catastrophe number two came 3 days later. Vanessa's lawyer filed a motion claiming that Derek was not the father of my baby. The petition argued that I had been unfaithful throughout my marriage, that I had deliberately gotten pregnant by another man to trap Derek, and that a paternity test should be ordered immediately to determine the truth. The motion was filed publicly. Every detail was available for anyone who wanted to read it. She is calling me a cheater, I said to Patty, my voice hollow with disbelief. She is the one who stole my husband, and she is publicly accusing me of cheating. It is a classic Darvo strategy, Patty explained. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. Make the actual victim look like the aggressor. Make the actual aggressor look sympathetic. Can she actually win this? The paternity test will clear you. But the damage is in the accusation, not the verdict. Everyone will remember that there were questions about your baby's paternity. Hardly anyone will remember when the test proves Derek is the father. I felt sick, violated in a way that went beyond anything Vanessa had done physically. Catastrophe number 3 hit the next day. Sterling Memorial Hospital's board of directors, some members of whom were not loyal to my father, received anonymous complaints about the hospital being used for personal vendettas. The complaints cited the leaked security footage, suggesting that my father had released it as an act of revenge rather than in pursuit of justice. The board asked my father to step back from decision-making temporarily, pending an investigation into whether hospital resources had been misused. Papa built that hospital, I said when he told me. He named it after Mama, and they are pushing him out because we were the ones who got assaulted there. My father's expression was calm, but I could see the fury beneath the surface. They will regret this, he said quietly. Every single one of them. In the span of 1 week, everything had reversed. I was no longer the sympathetic victim. I was the villain, the billionaire's daughter who used her family's power to persecute innocent people. The woman whose pregnancy might not even be her husband's child. The reason a beloved hospital was being torn apart by controversy. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling more hopeless than I had at any point in this entire nightmare. My phone buzzed a text from Derek, sent from a number I had not blocked. If you drop everything, the lawsuits, the financial pressure, all of it, we can make this go away quietly. My family is suffering. Charlotte, Vanessa is suffering. This has gone far enough. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back. Your family threw me out in the rain when I was 7 months pregnant. Your mistress slapped me in public while you watched. Your mother called my baby worthless. And you are asking me to show mercy? His response came immediately. This is who my family is. I cannot change them. But we can end this war before anyone else gets hurt. I laughed bitterly at my phone. No, Derek, I typed. You cannot change them because you have never tried. You are not caught in the middle. You chose the middle because it was easier than choosing me. I blocked that number too. Then I called Patty. I need your help, I said. I am done being the victim. It is time to fight back. The investigation took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of Patty digging through records and documents and financial trails. 3 weeks of my father's private investigators conducting interviews and gathering evidence. 3 weeks of me lying in bed, growing larger with each passing day, waiting for answers. What we found changed everything. Vanessa Blake's pregnancy did not align with her relationship with Derek. The timing was wrong. According to medical records that Patty obtained through legal channels, Vanessa's conception date was approximately 2 weeks before she started working at Derek's firm. Before they had ever met. But that was just the beginning. Patty spread documents across my hospital bed, her expression grim with satisfaction. Vanessa Blake has been receiving monthly payments from a man named Marcus Webb for the past 14 months, she said. The payments started about 6 months before she allegedly began her affair with Derek. Who is Marcus Webb? Her ex-boyfriend. According to multiple sources, they never actually broke up. The relationship went underground when Vanessa started pursuing Derek, but Marcus has been supporting her financially the entire time. I stared at the bank statements in front of me. Thousands of dollars transferred regularly from Marcus Webb's account to Vanessa's. The baby, I saw him. Baby, I said slowly. It is not Derek's. We cannot prove that definitively without a DNA test, Patty cautioned. But the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. Why would she do this? What could she possibly gain? That is where it gets interesting. Patty pulled out another document. Vanessa overheard Brittany at a party 8 months ago. Brittany was drunk and bragging about her brother's wife being the secret daughter of Lawrence Morgan. I felt the blood drain from my face. Brittany knew. This whole time, she knew who I was? She knew. And she told Vanessa, or rather Vanessa overheard and decided to use the information. The picture was finally becoming clear. A picture of calculation and manipulation that was far more complex than a simple affair. Vanessa researched your family, Patty continued. She learned about Sterling Industries. She understood how much money and power was at stake. And she formulated a plan to steal my husband, to steal everything. Vanessa was already pregnant with Marcus's baby when she started pursuing Derek. But Marcus does not have money. Marcus does not have connections. Marcus could not give her the life she wanted. So she decided to claim the baby was Derek's, to break up your marriage, and to position herself as the new wife of the man connected to the Morgan fortune. But she knew I would not just disappear, I said. She knew my father would protect me. She was counting on it. Think about it. She publicly assaults you on camera. The video goes viral. Your father retaliates with financial destruction. And then she flips the narrative, painting herself as the victim of a billionaire's vendetta. She wanted my father to attack her. She wanted the sympathy. She wanted the public support. She was betting that people would side with the underdog against the powerful elite. And for a while, it worked. I sat with this information, feeling it reshape everything I thought I knew. What do we do now? Patty smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Now we tell the truth, but we tell it smart. We spent the next week preparing, building our case not just in legal documents, but in the court of public opinion. Patty reached out to the same podcast that had hosted Vanessa's sob story. She offered them something they could not refuse, an exclusive interview with Charlotte Morgan. The real story, with receipts. The podcast aired on a Tuesday evening. I did not appear in person. I was still on bed rest, only 2 weeks away from my due date. But I recorded a video interview from my father's house, sitting in a comfortable chair with my pregnant belly prominently visible, my face showing the fading remnants of the bruise Vanessa had given me. The host started with softball questions. How was I feeling? How was the pregnancy progressing? What had the past few months been like? Then we got to the substance. Vanessa Blake claimed that you hid your family's wealth to trap Derek into marriage, the host said. What do you say to that? I looked directly into the camera. I hid my family's wealth because I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I have. My previous relationship ended when my boyfriend learned about my father's money. He said it made him feel like less of a man. I was trying to protect myself from that happening again. And the accusations about your baby's paternity? I smiled sadly. My baby is Derek's daughter. We conceived her during our marriage in our home during what I thought was a loving relationship. The paternity test that was ordered by the court confirmed this. But there is something else, I continued. Something that Vanessa Blake does not want anyone to know. I nodded to someone off camera. Patty stepped into frame, holding documents. We have evidence that Vanessa Blake's pregnancy does not align with her relationship with Derek Harrison, Patty said. Medical records show she conceived approximately 2 weeks before she started working at his company, before they ever met. The host's eyes widened. Are you saying the baby is not Derek's? We are saying there are serious questions that deserve answers, Patty replied. Questions about who the real father is. Questions about monthly payments Vanessa has been receiving from her ex-boyfriend, Marcus Webb. Questions about whether this entire affair was a calculated scheme to access the Morgan family fortune. The next guest walked into the studio. Marcus Webb was an average-looking man in his early 30s, visibly nervous, clearly uncomfortable with being on camera, but he had agreed to tell the truth in exchange for immunity from any fraud charges that might be filed. Vanessa and I never broke up, he said, his voice shaky but audible. She told me she had a plan to get us set for life. She said she was going to seduce some rich guy, claim the baby was his, and that once she had access to his money, we would disappear together. You are the father of her baby? He nodded. Yes, I am the father. The interview continued for another 20 minutes, laying out every piece of evidence, every financial trail, every lie Vanessa had told. By the time it ended, the narrative had shifted completely. The comments on social media changed overnight. I cannot believe I fell for her victim act. That woman is a psychopath. She planned this whole thing from the beginning. Charlotte Morgan deserves an apology from everyone who doubted her. The hashtag Justice for Charlotte trended again. This time it stayed. My daughter was born on a rainy Tuesday in November, exactly 2 weeks after the podcast aired. I named her Emma. It means whole, complete, entire unto herself. She came into the world screaming, her tiny fist clenched with determination, her eyes squeezed shut against the bright lights of the delivery room. She weighed 6 pounds, 11 ounces. She had a full head of dark hair and her father's nose, though I chose not to think about that. Holding her for the first time, feeling her warmth against my chest, hearing her cries quiet as she recognized my heartbeat, I understood something I had been struggling to grasp for months. I did not need Derek to be complete. I did not need a husband to validate my worth. I did not need anyone else to make my life meaningful. I had my daughter. I had my father. I had Patty and her terrible jokes and her fierce loyalty. I had myself. That was more than enough. The legal aftermath took another 6 months to fully resolve. Vanessa Blake faced criminal charges for fraud and assault. The fraud charges were complicated by jurisdictional issues, but the assault charge stuck. She pleaded guilty to avoid a trial and received 18 months of probation plus mandatory anger management classes. Not enough, in my opinion, but something. Marcus Webb disappeared into the Midwest somewhere, presumably to avoid the embarrassment of being publicly identified as Vanessa's co-conspirator. I heard later that he was working as a contractor in Ohio, keeping his head down and his name out of the news. The Harrison family scattered like leaves in a windstorm. Margaret sold her jewelry business, or what was left of it, and moved to Florida with William. I heard she was working as a sales associate at a department store. I hoped the job taught her some humility, but I doubted it. Brittany deleted all her social media accounts and took a job at a dental office. Without her online platform, without her family's money to support her lifestyle, she had to become a regular person for the first time in her life. The adjustment seemed to be difficult. And Derek signed away his parental rights as part of the divorce settlement. I did not ask him to. My father did not demand it. He offered it voluntarily, saying he did not deserve to be Emma's father after everything he had done. I accepted. Part of me felt guilty about that. Emma would grow up without a father. She would have questions someday about why her daddy was not around. I would have to find a way to explain that would not damage her while also not lying about the truth. But I also knew that Derek would have been a terrible father, not because he was inherently bad, but because he was weak, because he let other people make his decisions for him, because when things got hard, he folded. Emma deserved better than that. She deserved a role model who would teach her to stand up for herself, to fight for what mattered, to never ever let anyone make her feel small. I could be that role model. My father could be that role model. We did not need Derek. 6 months after Emma was born, my father asked me a question I was not expecting. Are you happy? We were sitting in his study, Emma asleep in my arms, the fireplace crackling softly in the background. It was the kind of quiet evening I had learned to treasure. I think so, I said. I am getting there. He nodded slowly. I was worried about you. After everything that happened, I was afraid you might close yourself off forever. I looked down at Emma's sleeping face, her tiny fingers curled against her chest, her eyelids fluttering with whatever dreams babies have. I thought about closing myself off, I admitted. It would have been easier, safer. But then I realized something. What? The people who hurt me wanted me to be small. They wanted me to shrink, to hide, to believe that I was worth less than I am. And if I let their cruelty change me, if I let it make me bitter and guarded and afraid, then they win. Even after everything else they lost, they still win. My father's eyes glistened. When did you get so wise? I learned from you. He laughed softly. I am not wise, sweetheart. I am just old. Same thing. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire burn, listening to Emma's soft breathing. What happens now? My father finally asked. Now, I smiled. Now I live. I raise my daughter. I build my business. I become the person I was always supposed to be. And if Derek comes back, if he tries to reconcile, I thought about the question. I had thought about it many times over the past months. What I would say, what I would do. He is not coming back, I said. Not really. He might send letters. He might try to reach out. But he does not actually want me. He wants the idea of fixing his mistake. There is a difference. My father nodded. There is. And even if he did want me, even if he showed up tomorrow with a genuine change of heart, the answer would still be no. I paused, searching for the right words. Forgiveness does not mean reconciliation. I can forgive him for being weak without inviting that weakness back into my life. I can wish him well without wanting him near my daughter. You are a better person than I am, my father said quietly. No, Papa. I shook my head. I am just tired of being angry. Anger takes so much energy. I would rather spend that energy on something that matters. Emma stirred in my arms, her little face scrunching up before relaxing again. I adjusted her blanket, smoothed her hair, felt my heart swell with a love more powerful than anything I had ever experienced. She is going to be remarkable, my father said. She already is. The invitation arrived on a Thursday morning tucked between utility bills and catalogs I never asked for. It was from Brittany Harrison. She was getting married. To a dentist she had met at the office where she worked. The invitation was simple, understated, completely unlike the flashy posts she used to make on social media. There was a handwritten note inside. Charlotte, I do not expect you to come. I do not deserve your presence or your forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that I have thought about what I did every single day for 3 years. I was cruel and shallow and complicit in something terrible. I cannot take it back, but I am trying to be better. I am in therapy. I am learning to be a real person instead of a performance of one. I hope you and Emma are happy. You deserve happiness more than anyone I know. Brittany. I stood in my kitchen reading the note twice, then a third time. Emma was playing in the living room, building elaborate towers with blocks and then gleefully knocking them down. She was almost 3 now, with dark curly hair and an infectious laugh that could light up any room. Mama, she called, watch me. I am watching, sweetheart. The tower collapsed. Emma clapped with delight. I looked at the invitation again. I was not going to attend the wedding. Some bridges are burned too thoroughly to rebuild. But I did something I would not have been capable of 3 years ago. I sent a card. Simple, brief, sincere. Brittany, I hope you find the happiness you are looking for. We all deserve second chances. Charlotte. That afternoon, Patty stopped by for lunch. She had been promoted to partner at her firm. We ate salads on my patio while Emma played in the yard, chasing butterflies and talking to the flowers. So, Patty said, swirling her iced tea, I heard through the grapevine that Derek is engaged. I raised my eyebrows. To whom? Some woman he met at a coffee shop, apparently. She is a nurse, divorced, 2 kids. I hope she knows what she is getting into. Apparently he has changed. Patty's voice was skeptical. Therapy, support groups, the whole 9 yards. His mother is not invited to the wedding. I absorbed this information, checked myself for any trace of jealousy or regret, found nothing but a mild, distant curiosity. Good for him, I said finally. I mean it. If he actually changed, then good for him. You do not feel anything? No anger? No resentment? I thought about the question seriously. I felt a lot of things for a long time. I was angry, I was hurt, I was devastated. But carrying those feelings around was exhausting. It was like dragging heavy luggage through every single day. At some point, I realized I could just put it down. Patty smiled. You are annoyingly well-adjusted, you know that? It took work. I laughed. So much therapy, so many journal entries. But yeah, I am okay. Better than okay. And the dating scene? I glanced at the house where James Sullivan's jacket was hanging on the hook by the door. James was a pediatric oncologist I had met at one of my father's charity events. He was quiet, kind, funny in unexpected ways. We had been dating for 8 months. It is going well, I said. He is wonderful with Emma. Patty grinned. I knew it. Tell me everything. Later that evening, after Patty left and Emma was in bed, I sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. James came out and sat beside me, 2 glasses of wine in hand. He passed me one and clinked his glass against mine. What are we toasting? I asked. Nothing specific, he smiled. Everything. Life. Survival. The fact that you exist. I laughed. That is dramatic. I am a dramatic person. He kissed my temple. I love you, Charlotte Morgan. I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his body, the steadiness of his presence. I love you too. We sat there until the stars came out, not talking, just existing together. It was peaceful in a way I had not known was possible 3 years ago. Comfortable in a way that felt earned rather than given. My phone buzzed, a text from my father. Emma's birthday party is confirmed for Saturday. I may have ordered a bouncy castle. I smiled and typed back, Papa, she is turning 3, not 13. His response was immediate. Never too early to start traditions. I put the phone down and looked up at the stars. 3 years ago, I was standing in the rain outside a townhouse that was never really mine, pregnant and humiliated, watching my life fall apart. 3 years ago, I thought I would never recover, never trust again, never love again. I was wrong. The slap in that hospital corridor was supposed to break me. Instead, it broke open the illusion I had been living in. It showed me who people really were when the mask came off. It taught me that love without respect is just a pretty word that means nothing. And most importantly, it taught me that I did not need anyone else to complete me. I was already whole. My name is Charlotte Morgan. I am a mother, a daughter, a businesswoman, a partner, and a survivor. I have been knocked down, thrown out, slapped across the face, and left for dead. And I am still standing. Not because I am special, not because I am wealthy, not because I have a father who can destroy anyone who hurts me. I am standing because I refuse to stay down. Emma will hear this story someday. When she is old enough, I will tell her about her father, about the choices he made, about the consequences that followed. I will tell her about Vanessa and Margaret and all the people who tried to make me small. But I will also tell her about Patty, who never gave up on me. About her grandfather, who was always there when I needed him. About James, who showed me that good men actually exist. And I will tell her this. The people who try to make you feel small are always afraid of how big you might become. Do not let their fear limit your light. Do not dim yourself to make someone else comfortable. Know your worth. Never let anyone make you feel like you deserve less than everything. And when they slap you down, get back up. Every single time. Get back up. And that is how a single satisfying slap changed everything. Not just for me, but for everyone who thought they could break me. If this story touched your heart, if it made you angry, if it made you cheer, do me a small favor. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss another story like this one. Drop a comment below. Tell me, was I right to stop my father's revenge, or should he have gone further? I read every single comment, and I love hearing your thoughts. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today, someone who needs to remember their worth. Thank you for staying until the end. You are the reason I tell these stories. I will see you in the next one.